Sometimes life places us in a silent point, as if the familiar ground had vanished and the new had not yet arrived. This space may feel like a void, a territory of uncertainty and discomfort, but in truth, it is a threshold. It is like being between breaths. The old air has already left, the next has not yet entered. This instant of suspension does not mean paralysis, but preparation for something greater. Many call this state confusion, others a blockage. However, if you observe calmly, you will see that it is not stagnation, it is transition. What once made sense begins to dissolve, and this can bring the sensation of no longer belonging to places, people, or even to your own old versions of self. What happens in this in-between is not loss, but expansion. The universe is asking for space so you can become something more. Bruce Lipton reminds us that the body reacts first to the vibrational environment, even before visible changes occur. In other words, if you feel out of place, it is because you are already vibrating differently, even if your outer life does not yet show clear signs. Joe Dispenza reinforces, the leap does not begin outside, but within. The field responds to inner coherence, not to external proof. You are not stuck, you are standing at the threshold of a quantum leap, and what you do in this place of silence and discomfort is decisive. Resisting prolongs the process, embracing it accelerates the crossing. This is not the end of a path, it is the edge of a horizon that is opening. There is a mysterious point in the process of transformation where the current life no longer serves as shelter, yet the new one has not fully manifested. It is a strange territory where old routines lose their flavor and old roles no longer fit. In this interval, many believe they are lost, when in truth they are walking across the invisible bridge between two worlds. This space is not empty, it is transition. It is like the silence that precedes the first note of a song. Apparently nothing is happening, but everything is about to begin. The common mistake is to confuse this crossing with failure or stagnation. But if you look deeper, you will realize that the discomfort is precisely the proof that something new is germinating inside you. Bruce Lipton shows us that cells continuously respond to the vibrational environment. When you feel displaced, it is not because you are lost, but because your biology is already perceiving signals from the new field in formation. The body senses first, the mind resists afterward. That is why in this space between worlds, the invitation is not to give up, but to remain. Each moment of presence is an invisible brick laid on this vibrational bridge. And as you cross it, you discover that you were never trapped. You were in a process of expansion. Before every true expansion, there is a moment of contraction. It is like the bow that must be drawn before releasing the arrow, or like the seed that in order to break through its shell must first endure the pressure of the earth around it. This contraction is not regression, it is the prelude to the leap. It announces that the old identity is being recalibrated to make room for a new frequency. At this stage, what once felt comfortable begins to suffocate. Relationships, habits, and thoughts that were once safe now seem too small to contain who you are becoming. It is natural to feel lost, as if you were unlearning how to be who you once were. But this sensation is not a mistake. It is the sign that expansion is about to unfold. Bruce Lipton reminds us that the body interprets change as a threat because its biological programming prioritizes survival. For this reason, this phase of contraction may trigger anxiety, fear, or even the desire to return to what is familiar. Yet it is precisely in this tension that the old programs begin to dissolve, creating space for the new vibrational code to establish itself. Joe Dispenza adds that consciousness, by sustaining new images and emotions, prepares the body to vibrate in alignment with the future. Contraction then ceases to be seen as a blockage and becomes an essential part of the process. Because it is within this discomfort that the old dissolves and the new finds passage. The feeling of being trapped is, in fact, an illusion created by the mind that still seeks references in what has already passed. When you look at your life and feel that nothing is moving, it is only because transformation happens first on invisible levels. What seems like paralysis is actually stretching. You are being expanded beyond the frequency you once knew. The friction that arises in this process is not a sign of failure, but of transition. It is like when an airplane passes through a layer of turbulence. For a few moments, everything shakes, but it is exactly this movement that announces you are crossing into a new altitude. In the same way, when life seems to resist, it is because your old identity is trying to remain active. Bruce Lipton explains that the subconscious works to preserve patterns, even when they are no longer healthy. It associates repetition with safety. That is why when you begin to vibrate differently, this programmed mind reacts, trying to pull you back to the familiar. But this does not mean stagnation. It means that change is already underway. Recognizing that you are not stuck, but in process, is the first step to relieving anxiety. Because the real mistake is not in feeling this friction, but in interpreting it as a blockage. What you call a prison is, in fact, the crossing into the quantum leap that has already begun. The quantum leap always demands a price, letting parts of yourself that no longer serve die. This process is not destruction, but dismantling. The old identity, formed by beliefs, emotional patterns, and automatic behaviors, begins to unravel. What once sustained your life now becomes a weight, and this collapse, however uncomfortable it may feel, is the necessary passage for the birth of the new. It is common at this stage to notice changes in the body, in habits, and even in relationships. People may drift away, interests may lose strength, routines once sacred may no longer make sense. All of this is a reflection of the inner field reorganizing itself. Just as a house needs to be emptied before being renovated, your biology and consciousness also need to create space. Bruce Lipton explains that our cells are shaped according to the perception we have of the environment. When your internal vibration changes, the body responds by dissolving old programs that are no longer compatible. This collapse, although uncomfortable, is proof that the field is preparing the ground for another version of you to inhabit reality. Joe Dispenza reinforces that the leap is not about achieving something outside, but about becoming someone new within. The old identity disintegrates so that a new frequency can be embodied. What seems like loss is actually liberation. And every time you allow this collapse, you move closer to the reality you want to live. In quantum physics, there is a fascinating principle. Observation collapses infinite possibilities into a specific reality. The universe, in its natural state, is made of waves of probability, of latent potentials awaiting choice. And it is exactly your focus, your attention, that decides which of these possibilities becomes real. The same happens within you. Your identity is the observer that shapes the experience you call life. The quantum field does not respond to what you desperately wish for, but to what you consistently vibrate. It is not the intensity of the request that matters, but the coherence of the state you sustain. Bruce Lipton shows that your cells do not follow isolated willpower, but the perception you continuously transmit to the inner environment. Thus, your biology becomes a direct reflection of the vibration you maintain. Joe Dispenza expands on this by saying that the heart and brain, when coherent, create a powerful electromagnetic field capable of influencing external reality. What you emit when you are aligned is not just energy, but a clear code that the field recognizes and organizes into equivalent circumstances. Therefore, the leap is not a miracle that comes from outside, but a consequence of the physics of consciousness. By changing your vibration, you change the reality that collapses before you. What once seemed impossible stops being a matter of effort and becomes a matter of vibrational coherence. There is a moment in the process of change when we are called to perform a kind of spiritual surgery. It is not with scalpels or external instruments, but with the courage to look within and face patterns that no longer serve us. This surgery does not cut, it releases. It does not destroy, but makes space. It is like carefully removing old debris so that a new construction can rise on the same ground. This movement does not ask for guilt, but for honesty. It is the serene recognition that certain beliefs, memories, and even identities were once useful, but have now become narrow walls. Bruce Lipton reminds us that unconscious beliefs are the programs that most influence our biology. As long as we do not bring them into the light of consciousness, they continue to operate silently. In this sense, spiritual surgery is a loving choice to remove these programs, not with violence, but with acceptance. Joe Dispenza shows that when we become conscious observers of our recurring thoughts and emotions, we begin to dissolve the power they once had over us. The simple act of perceiving is, in itself, a form of healing. Each belief released makes space for a new vibrational code. Each pattern let go allows another version of yourself to flourish. This process may feel painful, but it is, in truth, liberating, because what is being removed is not who you are, but only what no longer matches the life you want to create. Many people believe they can only take the leap once they feel ready, as if security must come first and change afterward. But the paradox is exactly the opposite. Readiness is born from the act of leaping. It is in the movement of crossing the unknown that body, mind, and field reorganize, generating the sense of preparedness that once seemed absent. This waiting for absolute safety is a trap of the old self, which seeks proof before risking. But Bruce Lipton reminds us that the subconscious governs most of our decisions, and it is programmed to preserve old patterns. If you wait until you feel completely safe, you will keep repeating the same vibration indefinitely. Joe Dispenza shows that the leap is not an external event, but a sustained internal decision. You become the future version of yourself before it visibly manifests. And when you act from this new state, even if you still hesitate, it is at that very moment that readiness begins to be born within you. The field responds to I am, not to I will be. Thus, readiness ceases to be a prerequisite and becomes a consequence. It is not about waiting until you have the courage to cross, but about crossing and discovering that courage was always within you. Quantum change is not something you win like a trophy. It is something you embody, step by step, breath by breath. The quantum leap does not happen in a single cinematic instant, full of grand signs. It is built in the invisible realm of vibrational micro-actions, those subtle choices you make throughout the day. A conscious breath in the midst of chaos, a thought reshaped before turning into complaint, a simple gesture of gratitude. All of this sends clear signals to the quantum field that you are vibrating differently. Bruce Lipton shows that our cells are like sensitive antennas, constantly responding to the energetic environment. Each micro-choice of presence, each moment when you choose coherence over automatic repetition, sends your body a new program. This process does not require Herculean effort, but delicate consistency. Joe Dispenza reinforces that the field does not respond to the intensity of an anxious request, but to the sustained coherence of who you become. Small daily practices work like drops of water shaping stone, discreet yet consistent. It is not about how many techniques you use, but about the vibration you choose to sustain in each gesture. Thus, every micro-action becomes a silent vote for the reality you wish to create. The quantum leap is not in some distant future. It already begins each time you decide to vibrate in alignment with the new. And together, these small choices pave the way for the great change to become inevitable. The true leap rarely happens with fireworks or emotional explosions. It reveals itself in silence, almost imperceptibly, like an internal click that changes everything without noise. It is in this subtle instant that control dissolves and clarity appears, bringing a sense of peace that replaces euphoria. What once felt distant becomes familiar, not because something external has changed, but because you finally began to inhabit the new frequency. This silence can confuse the mind, which is used to looking for grand signs. Often the ego waits for a clear milestone, a concrete proof, a spectacular event. But the quantum field does not operate through spectacles. It manifests through the stable coherence you sustain. The absence of drama is, in fact, the evidence that the leap has already occurred. Bruce Lipton explains that our cells adapt to the new vibrational environment naturally, without conscious effort. This means that when you notice you no longer react the same way, when certain pains have lost their intensity, or when old triggers no longer control you, it is because the transformation has already consolidated in the body. Joe Dispenza reinforces that this moment is not euphoria, but stability. The silent leap brings a kind of serenity that does not depend on external circumstances. It is the sign that your frequency already matches the reality you desire. And precisely because it is so subtle, many fail to realize that they have already crossed the threshold they were searching for. You don't need to wait for a major event to believe that the change has begun. The field responds the very moment you decide to vibrate as your new identity. Even if the external world does not yet show clear signs, something invisible is already in motion. What once seemed distant begins to align silently with your inner state, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together out of sight. Anxiety arises when you search for immediate proof, but the field does not respond to haste, it responds to consistency. Bruce Lipton reminds us that our cells are in constant dialogue with the inner environment. When you sustain a new perception, the body begins to reprogram itself even before external circumstances shift. The signal has already been sent, and the response is already on its way. Dispenza explains that it is the coherence between mind, heart, and body that generates the wave capable of collapsing reality. This means that by living as if you already are who you want to be, you become a stable transmitter. The field makes no distinction between imagination felt as real and reality already manifested. For it, both are valid vibrational codes. Therefore, proof will not come from the outside first. It is already happening within you, in the way you think, feel, and react differently. Each time you remain in coherence, you strengthen the new timeline. The field is responding, and the silence of this process is the evidence that manifestation has already begun. You are not stuck. What you feel now is the most sacred space of transformation, the interval between who you were and who you are becoming. This space, though uncomfortable, is fertile. It does not reveal failure, but expansion. Every conscious breath, every moment of presence, every choice that honors your new identity is the leap itself happening in real time. Bruce Lipton reminds us that 95% of our life is guided by the subconscious, where the patterns that create our reality are stored. When you shift your inner environment, your cells begin to reprogram themselves to match this new vibration. It is biology confirming that the leap does not depend on external circumstances, but on what you decide to sustain within. Neville Goddard reinforces that creation is not born of fantasies, but from the consistent assumption of a state. It is not about imagining for a few moments, but inhabiting stably the identity that already contains what you desire to experience. It is when you live as if you already were, even without external proof, that the field bends to your coherence. You are crossing an invisible bridge, and every step you take toward alignment is the quantum leap unfolding. Do not wait for an external sign to believe. The greatest evidence is already pulsing within you. The silence, the discomfort, and the growing clarity that the life you seek is not in a distant future, but in the present you are vibrating right now.